course, I've seen badgers multiple times over the years. Of course, the only time they're no danger to us, I mean, the only time they would attack someone is if they're frightened, cornered, or are protecting cubs. Because quite often, if a badger sees you, they'll just take one look at you and then just turn around and disappear off into the darkness. This is their range. Now, the next animal I'm going to show you all is probably our most well-known bird. It is the robin. Now, whether a king bird or not, everyone can identify a robin, as it's a familiar and much loved garden bird. The robin is also a symbol of the festive season. He first appeared on Christmas cards in the Victorian era to represent the red tunic wearing postman of the day. But also, robins appeared in a couple of stories in the Bible. One of them was that when Christ was born, there was a fire they tried to light a fire in the barn to warm up, and a robin actually came and beat its wings next to it to keep the fire going, but it got too close to the fire and burned its chest. Another story is that the crucifixion, a robin landed on Christ's shoulder when as his crucifixion. I think something along the lines of tried to help him save himself, and got pricked by one of the thorns in his crown of thorns, and that's how they got their red chest. Of course, the robin has always held a special place in the hearts of British people. One of the main reasons for that could be that the robin of Britain is a very different character to its European counterpart. On the continent, the bird is shy and retiring, but on this side of the channel, they will regularly follow the gardener looking for worms and will even hop up to a familiar hand to take seeds. Of course, here in the UK, we're able to enjoy the robin's song all year round, partly because of the male's territorial behaviour. Of course, robins do mean business when defending their territories, and the males are quite prepared to back up their song with a fight that can sometimes be to the death. And, of course, probably the time that robins struggle the most is during the winter, because in the winter the robin has to fight against its most lethal enemies, which are cold, hunger and disease. And to fight against the cold, it will quite often fluff up its feathers to make it look almost like a puffball. And a male and a female who pair for life have to keep their feeding territory protected throughout the winter until spring. But also, robins in winter, when they come to gardens to feed on nuts and seeds as well as mealworms, which are left out by humans, but also kitchen scraps like cheese and bacon rind can be left out, and they can quite often give the robins the energy they need to make it through the winter. At the arrival of spring, the robin will perform its song to both proclaim his breeding territory and rejoin his mate. Of course, robins do sing at night, but mainly in well-lit areas, and they're quite often mistaken for the far more elusive nightingale. And quite often when the robins have established their territory, they will build their nest in a hedgerow, a tree, or even in a man-made nest box. In fact, the nest is usually made of dead leaves and moss with a hair lining. But also, robins are actually very well known for their inventiveness. They've also been known to nest in hanging baskets, kettles, and even car bonnets. Although robins are very sensitive to disturbance and they will abandon a nest if they think it's been discovered. So if you ever see a robin nest, try not to leave any sign of your disturbance. And when a female robin lays her eggs, they can usually be about 3 or 4 or even 5 chicks that hatch. Both the male and the female will bring food to the nest, and that usually consists of worms, beetles, woodlice, or other insects, or any other invertebrates. But they will even bring in human scraps like cheese and bacon rind, and even chewed up seeds and nuts. And of course, robin chicks need parental care even after they've fledged, and that is when the male will step in to lend a hand. Of course, as he helps the other chicks of their first brood who'd prepare to leave, the female can then focus on the next brood, because robins will quite often have 2 or 3 broods in a season. And of course, robins don't get their reddish-orange breast until they're fully mature. So for much of the year until they get their orange breast, they look brown and speckly. But of course, they're dependent on their parents for another month or so, and then they go off to find their own territories. And robins are fortunately not endangered at all. In fact, there are probably millions of them across the British Isles, and they're always a very common sight in gardens and parks, but also on Christmas cards. And here is their range. Now, the final animal I'm going to show you is one of our largest and probably most elusive predators. It's this, the Pine Marten. Now, Pine Martens are in the weasel family, like the badger, the stoat, and the wolverine. And of course, they're a lot bigger than a stoat, probably around the same size as a ferret, but they also have incredibly powerful jaws and teeth. In fact, they have very long canine teeth, probably half an inch, and these stout cheek teeth called carnassials, and they're what are used for biting into bones. And Pine Martens also have a dark brown coat with a almost creamy yellow on their throat and chest. And as their name suggests, they mostly live in coniferous woodland, with pine trees. And of course, like all members of the weasel family, they are well known for punching above their weight, for taking on animals many times their own size, and having no fear at all. And of course, Pine Martens mostly feed on bird eggs, as well as birds, small mammals like rodents and rabbits and hares. And they will also take frogs and lizards. But recently, Pine Martens have been reintroduced to some parts of England and much of Wales, because it's been shown in Scotland, which is still their stronghold, that the Pine Martens have been able to prey on grey squirrels, which are not native to Britain at all and have been causing problems for the red squirrels. They've been preying on grey squirrels and reducing their numbers so that the red squirrels can have a chance to come back to their own ranges. And of course, the Pine Marten, unfortunately, was driven to extinction in much of Britain by the Victorians, who took a fancy to their fur. But they are now a protected species, and as I said, they have been they've started to be reintroduced from Scotland into Wales and parts of northern and central England. Even so, they are very, very hard to find. In fact, Pine Martens have actually been a lot more recognised since they appeared in His Dark Materials by Philip Pullman, where Lyra Silvertongue's demon Pan settles as a Pine Marten. I mean, I think Pine Martens are absolutely gorgeous, and I would love to see a Pine Marten. I've never seen one before, but even so, it would be a challenge for me to see one because they're mostly nocturnal, which means they're active at night. They can have widely extended territories, and they are very shy and elusive. But if they are successful in spreading back to the rest of northern and central England as well as Wales, then they can bring down the populations of grey squirrels, which can give a chance for the red squirrels to come back. And so, hopefully, in a few years' time, we could have one of our biggest and most fearless predators back in the rest of Britain. And up here in Scotland is their stronghold, but of course around here and here is where they've been recently reintroduced in England, including parts of central England, but also around here in Wales. So hopefully, fingers crossed, that we could see these animals in the rest of Britain. Right. Well, that was the remastering of my 20 Animals of Britain PowerPoint presentation. I hope you all enjoyed, and if you did, please drop a comment down below, but also check out my other remastered PowerPoints so far. Thank you.